Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by nature. In nature, nothing is perfect, and yet everything is perfect.
I don't fully understand!
And that is your right, as is our 5-minute mystery's right to be impossible to understand.
I hear that.
Inspector Craig, I just decided that working for the police department is very ratifying, especially even more so when it gets us free passes to the circus.
The word is gratifying, nimble-brained. To ratify means to put your stamp of approval on something.
So that's what I said. With me, it's very much okay. When I was a kid, I was always crazy to join the circus.
You know, Pepper, sometimes I wonder...
Yeah?
Oh, never mind.
Inspector Craig, I've been looking everywhere for you.
Oh, hello, Danny. Pepper and I want to thank you for the passes. I think the big show is better than ever this year.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be much of a host, Inspector. It seems the snake charmer's been found dead and...
Murder?
It looks like suicide. I'd like you to run over with me and give it a routine check. Sorry to bust in on your fun this way.
Looks like suicide to me, all right, Inspector.
An open and shut case, as far as I'm concerned.
It's so hard to believe. Dorothy.
You own part interest in the circus, don't you, Brian?
That's right, Inspector. Nat Bryan and I are partners. Nat, I can't tell you how sorry I am.
Thanks.
How long were you and Mrs. Bryan married?
Not long. I can't believe she'd do a thing like this.
She was the snake charmer, right?
Yes.
Suppose you tell us how it happened, Brian, so we can get the facts straight.
Well, lately, Dorothy and I... Well, that is, there have been disagreements, quarrels.
There was some talk about a trapeze artist, is that it?
Yes. Dorothy was insanely jealous and thought I was interested in a little tightrope walker.
Were you?
No, there never was anyone else for me but Dorothy. And now...
All right, go on.
I came here late this afternoon to get her to listen to reason. She refused to be reasonable. There was quite a scene, and finally she got up and ran into the dressing room.
Yes, I see. These tents are divided into little rooms. It's very clever. You were out here, is that it?
Yes.
And she went into what could be called the other room. All right, go on.
I had no idea what she intended to do. Otherwise, I just can't seem to realize.
We understand.
Of course we do, Nat. Go on.
Well, that's all there is. She shot herself. And I was sitting here all the time. After a while, I got up and left. I was seen coming from this direction by several people. That's why I came and told you this. I didn't want the police to think I was hiding anything.
You did the right thing, of course. This tent is set apart some distance from the others, isn't it?
Yes. No one wanted to be near the snake charmer's tent, in case any of them got loose.
That accounts for no one hearing the shot. There's one thing I don't get. How is it you didn't hear the sound of a gun going off?
I told you it was late afternoon, feeding time for the animals. Dorothy's tent is next to the giraffes. They were making such a racket hollering for their food, I couldn't hear.
Inspector, if I may make so bold as to make a remark here, this guy is, to put it bluntly, an awful liar.
Why, how dare you?
Are you sure?
Plain as the nose on my face.
Well, that's plain enough for me. Hold still, Brian. Don't make a move.
In a moment, Pepper will reveal the clue that led him to believe it was murder, not suicide. But first...
Pepper is going to tell us how he knew. This is so exciting.
I take it you don't have the solution figured out?
Oh, no. Do you?
Of course. It is rather simple.
Okay, I'm listening.
What do you know about giraffes?
Well, I know they have really long necks.
Precisely. And that is what dooms our murderer.
Come again?
You'll see.
Now, back to our story.
You better explain, Pepper. How do you know he's lying?
Because giraffes is like turtles. They don't make noises. Brother, is he dumb?
Good work, Pepper. Okay, Brian, you're under arrest.
You see, all you need to know is a bit about giraffes and you are good to go.
That's not true. I happen to know that they can hum. Therefore, the alibi is solid.
And you suffer from nincompoopism.
Is that a thing?
It is. Can you hum louder than a gunshot?
I don't know. I've never tried.
What's that you say?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. On the show today, we have a lot of original content. We open with a creepy encounter with Lizzy Borden and follow that up with a moment in time from June 6th, 1944. Then we have a horror/detective drama from the series The Inner Sanctum. It is titled The Scream. We will end the show with Sarah Lockwood Pardee and the Winchester Mystery House.
That sounds amazing.
It will be. So, to start us all off, here is When Worlds Collide from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Audible has sponsored the show now since July of 2019. We have reviewed more than 140 audiobooks, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that Audible has over 200,000 books available? And a lot of those are included in the free catalog. Audible is amazing and is the perfect companion to Ron's Amazing Stories. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Audible. So what am I listening to? When Worlds Collide, written by Edwin Ballmer and Philip Wiley. It is narrated by Peter Ganem. My first encounter with this story is the classic sci-fi film released in 1951. I was so enamored with it that to this day I watch it at least once per year. And if that's not enough for you, I built a replica model of the famous spaceship which I keep on my display shelf. I was introduced to the movie by my high school English teacher and had to write a what-if paper all about it. Now here's the odd part. It wasn't until recently did I discover that there is a novelization of the story. However, the book differs greatly from the film and is so much better and, quite frankly, freaky. The stuff of nightmares. But what is the story about? A runaway planet hurtles towards Earth. As it draws near, massive tidal waves, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions rack our planet, devastating continents, drowning out cities, and wiping out millions. In central North America, a team of scientists race to build a spacecraft powerful enough to escape the doomed Earth. Their greatest threat, they soon discover, comes not from the skies, but other humans. Here is a clip from the beginning of the book.
The secret itself was still safe. It was clear that the public not yet could have learned it. No, the nature of the tremendous and terrific discovery remained locked in the breasts of the men who had made it. No one had broken so badly under the burden of it that he had let slip any actual details of what had been learned. But the fact that there was a secret of incomparable importance was out. David Ransdell received plenty of proof of it as he stood at the liner's rail and the radiograms from shore were brought to him. He had had 7, all of the same sort, within the hour, and here was another. He held it without opening it while he gazed across the sparkling water at the nearing shores of Long Island, beyond which lay New York. Strange that, in a city which he could not yet see, men could be so excited about his errand, while the fellow passengers at his elbow glanced at him with only mild curiosity at the sudden frequency of radiograms for him. They would be far less indifferent if they had read them. The first, arriving less than an hour ago, offered him $1,000 for first and exclusive information, to be withheld from all others for 12 hours, of what he carried in his black box. It was signed by the most famous newspaper in New York. Hardly had the messenger started back to the radio station when a second boy appeared with a message from another newspaper. $2,000 for first information of your business in New York. Within 10 minutes, the offer had jumped to $5,000, made by another paper. Plainly, the knowledge that there was a secret of utmost importance had spread swiftly. The offer remained at $5,000 for 20 minutes. Indeed, it dipped once to $2,500 as some timid soul on a more economical newspaper ventured to put in his bid. But quickly it jumped again and doubled. It was $10,000 in the last radiogram which Dave had opened. $10,000 cash for first information, which now needed to be withheld from others only for 6 hours, regarding what he was bringing to New York. The thrilling and all-absorbing fact of it was that David Ransdell himself did not know what he carried which could become of such amazing concern. He was merely the courier who transported and guarded the secret. He could look in his box, of course, he possessed the key, but he had the key as also he had custody of the heavy black box, because those who had entrusted it to him knew that he would never violate his word. Least of all would he sell out to others. Moreover, if curiosity tried him beyond his strength, he had Professor Bronson's word for it that the contents of the box would be utterly meaningless to him. Only a few men, with very special training, could make out the meaning.
Now, I know it's hard to draw much from that clip, but we work with what they give me. What you should know is this. This Audible book has a crackling plot and a sizzling cataclysmic vision that has made When Worlds Collide one of the most popular and influential end-of-the-world novels and films of all time. Yes, the science is dated, but the action, description, and storytelling is off the charts. You're gonna love it. And if that appeals to you, head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories and you can have When Worlds Collide for free. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This also gains you access to the included catalog, which is constantly updated with new titles. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Your story comes from Boston today, but it was sent in by Judy Stevens, who writes to us from Bellows Falls, Vermont. This is our very first story from that state. We're getting very close to having at least one story from every state in the USA. I give this tale a 10 out of 10 for creepiness. Judy has titled it Lizzy Borden and My Dad. About 8 years ago, when I was 13, my family, consisting of my younger brother who was 10 at the time, my stepmom, and my dad, we went to visit family in Boston, Massachusetts. I am a huge fan of the paranormal, and my stepmom grew up there, So she was telling us some local urban legends and ghost stories. One story she told us was about Lizzy Borden, a young woman who was accused of murdering her family with an axe. She recounted a rhyme that the kids in her school used to say. Lizzy Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. My stepmom told us that kids used to dare each other to visit her grave at night. My dad laughed and suggested that we go. I was completely excited and agreed. Later on, around midnight, we all set off to visit her grave. We pulled into the graveyard, and it was deserted. My dad and I set out to look for it, while my brother and stepmom stayed in the car. We walked around for a bit, and we finally found Lizzy. We had brought a lantern for a more spooky effect and sat it down between us. My dad turned off the lantern and suggested that we ask some questions. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I complied and asked the usual, "Are you here? Can you give us a sign?" And I ended with, "Did you do it?" We sat there for a minute or two, and then there was this rustling behind us. My dad turned his head to look. I was frozen with fear and decided to stare just straight forward. "I think I see something," he said. "Stop," I said, assuming he was just messing with me. "I'm serious." His voice was shaking a bit, making me just about lose it. We sat there for another minute, which felt like forever, just staring in the direction of the noise. "We need to go," he finally said, and he grabbed the lantern and took off towards the car. When we got in, my dad said, "Go, go, go." My mother started driving and headed back to where we came in. The gate was now locked. My stomach dropped, and we started driving around again, looking for another exit. We ended up right back at the front gate, but now it was open. We tore out of there and sat in silence. "Did you see anything?" my stepmom finally said. "We're not going to talk about it," my dad said from the back seat. We drove back to my grandparents' house. My brother and I couldn't sleep that night, and I stared down the hallway at the grandfather clock, jumping at the ringing of each hour. We didn't speak of it again that trip, and we left a few days later. I had a few dreams about that experience, each time with Lizzy Borden holding an axe and looking for me. I asked my dad directly what he saw, and he shook his head and said something like, "I don't want to tell you. I don't know if I'm ever going to tell you. I don't want to scare you." A few years later, my brother, my dad, and I went out to lunch. We visited him during the summer, as that he lived in a different city now, so we don't get to see each other as often. While at lunch, my brother said, "Remember when we went to Boston and—" My dad cut him off and said, "We're not going to talk about it. We're never going to talk about it." "Dad," I said, "please, I want to know." It took some coaxing, but finally he told us what happened that night. When he turned his head, he saw the torso and head of a young woman holding an axe. She moved towards him, brought the axe down on his head, and then disappeared. He said he felt the axe hit him, and the pain was unbearable. It passed immediately, but he's never been able to shake how it felt. I don't know what actually happened that night, and I don't know if he actually saw something. Something inside me tells me that he did, as his voice is so serious and definite when he tells his story. I do know that that event will scar the both of us for the rest of our lives. We've never gone to visit the grave again, and to this day, I refused to say her name out loud. Judy Stevens, Bellow Falls, Vermont. Okay, that is a red letter story. I felt chills as I read it, and I can't even tell you how I feel about it. The Bordens, including the infamous Lizzy Borden, her sister Emma, her father and stepmother that she was accused of murdering, are all buried in the same plot at Oak Grove Cemetery. It dates back to 1855. There are numerous stories from that memorial site, and all you have to do to read a few is Google Lizzy Borden Graveyard. It sounds like an incredibly creepy place. Thank you for sharing your story, Judy. Well, that's all we have time for today. If you have a story that you want to share, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and click on the submission banner. Leave your story, give it a title, and please tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can. The date is June 6th, 1944. On the previous morning, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe, gave the go-ahead for Operation Overlord. This was to be the largest amphibious military operation in history. By dawn, British and Canadian troops overcame light opposition to capture Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. So did the Americans at Utah. The task was much tougher at Omaha Beach. Over 2,000 troops were lost, and it was only through tenacity that the objective was achieved. By day's end, 155,000 Allied troops had successfully stormed Normandy's beaches. What you're about to hear is a collection of news reports from that day.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is a special bulletin read by John Snag. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress. The first official news came just after 9:30, when Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force, usually called SHAPE from its initials, issued Communique Number 1. This said, under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
The paratroops are landing. They're landing all around me as I speak. They've come in from the sea, and they're fluttering down, red, white, and blue parachutes fluttering down, and they're just about the best thing that we've seen for a good many hours. They're showering in. There's no other word for it.
From where I am, standing between the two pilots of this glider, I can see the navigation lights of the tug in front of us, and off to left and right, the navigation lights of other tugs and other gliders bound on the same mission. Circling above from time to time, I can see the lights of the fighter screen, which is protecting us. And looking back down the glider, there are seated, although I can't see them in the half light, officers and men, all laden up with equipment so heavily that they can barely walk. But they've got to carry with them the means by which they can fight the moment they land. It's just about 9 o'clock and a whole mass of gliders has just come in, having been towed across the channel from Britain. They've received a particularly severe welcome from the German Ack defences, and the flak has been going up from all around us. I can see about 4 or 5 coming in through the trees, skimming very low over the ploughed field and coming into touchdown. There'll barely be room for them.
All hands to reaching station.
This is the day and this is the hour. The sky is lightening over the coast of Europe as we go in. The sun is blazing down brightly now. It's almost like an omen, the way it suddenly come out just as we were going in. The whole sky is bright, the sea is a glittering mass of silver, with all these craft of every kind moving across it, and the great battleships in the background blazing away at the shore.
People of Western Europe. A landing was made this morning on the coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force. This landing is part of the concerted United Nations plan for the liberation of Europe, made in conjunction with our great Russian allies. I have this message for all of you. Although the initial assault may not have been made in your own country, the hour of your liberation is approaching.
Our featured story is a horrific whodunit from the creative minds of the Inner Sanctum. Now, what does this mean? Well, it is part horror story, part detective story, with some ghastly humor thrown in, all of which were trademarks of the old-time radio series. The Inner Sanctum Mystery aired from 1941 to 1952. It was created by Himan Brown and was based on input given to him by the mystery novels of Simon Schuster. They, at the time, were the leaders of print media and inspired many of the classic radio shows of the time. Our story comes from their later broadcasts and explores the mind of the serial killer. More about that later. It is titled The Scream, and it first aired in January of 1950.
Good evening, friends of the creaking door. This is your host to welcome you into the Inner Sanctum. Come in, come on in. Well, let me tell you about the loot we picked up in our family. Mother got a new broom. Yeah, she needed it ever since she wrecked the old one in a forced landing on the roof last month. Uncle William got a fur-lined straitjacket, and dear, darling little Aunt Matilda got a new hat pin. Yes, her last one got stuck in the skull of her fourth husband. All right. Turn your lights low and your radio up. And remember that all the actors getting killed on this program are being well paid for it. The winter winds moaned around the gabled house like a wandering band of wailing women. As Caroline Giles, puzzled and frightened by something she's seen in the gathering dusk, makes her way into the living room. This is young Mrs. Giles' first night at the family mansion built by her husband's grandfather. Only this morning, the attractive bride arrived after a honeymoon trip in Europe. When she enters the huge, shadow-filled room, she notices the servant girl at the window. She's a young girl, the only other person in the house. And Caroline can see that she's scarcely able to control the terror she feels.
Mary? Yes, ma'am. What's going on out there? Nothing. When will Mr. Giles be home?
He should be here within an hour. Why are those cars stopping out there?
Cars, Mrs. Giles?
Oh, really, Mary? You must see them as well as I do. 3 of them stopped within a few minutes. Look, there's another one.
Maybe that's Mr. Giles.
No, the car isn't coming into the driveway. It's stopping outside. Who are these people, Mary?
I don't know.
Why should they stop outside? What did they want?
I don't know.
Oh, Mary. You don't know. There's no reason to become hysterical.
Mrs. Giles, come away from the window.
But why?
You don't know them. Oh, please come away from the window.
Mary, why? Now...
Oh, I've warned you. They're throwing rocks through the window. Get down, Mrs. Giles. Get down on the floor. You'll be hurt.
But Mary...
Oh, please. Mrs. Giles, just pray that they don't come in here. Just pray that they don't.
Wait a minute, Mary. I hear sirens. It's the police.
Oh, the police. Oh, thank heavens. They'll make them go away.
Mrs. Giles, I'm Richard Croydon, the mayor of this town. I'm sorry we had to come here under these circumstances.
How do you do?
This is John Dent, our local chief of police.
Mrs. Giles, I am very sorry about what happened tonight. The crowd is gone now. I'll do my best to see that it never happens again.
I've also come to offer what apologies I can. Must have been a frightful experience for you on your first day here. Our people may appear civilized enough, but in many ways we're a very primitive community. I suppose your husband told you that?
No, he didn't. But David told me about you, Mr. Croydon. He said you were the oldest friend he has. I believe you live down the road?
Yes, that's right. That's how I happened to see those cars coming, and I phoned Chief Dent.
But why did those cars come, Mr. Croydon?
Why?
Well, yes. Why should those people who hardly know me do a thing like this?
Well, didn't David tell you?
Tell me what?
Where is David now?
He went to town. I expect him any minute.
Well, perhaps he'll tell you what you want to know when he returns.
Why can't you tell me?
I'm not sure that I care to.
Mr. Dent, perhaps you'll be kind enough to explain this?
Well, them people weren't after you, ma'am. They were after the man you married.
David? But what?
Dent, if Mr. Giles hasn't told her, I don't think it's your place to do so.
Well, the woman has a right to know. The reason them folks are trying to kill Mr. Giles is because they think he's a murderer. Some call him even worse than that.
What do you mean?
Mrs. Giles, 2 years ago, a series of killings began in this here county. Girls, young girls, 4 of them were found on lonely roads, stabbed to death. Homicidal maniac, that's what the state police officer said.
And my husband?
Well, your husband was arrested for them crimes. He was tried right here, but they let him go. We didn't have enough evidence.
David, can't believe it. Why should they suspect him?
Well, he knew one of them girls, and, he had been sent away, ma'am.
Sent away? What are you talking about?
Well, everyone knowed there was something wrong with him. He had to go to an asylum for a while.
That's quite enough, then. Mrs. Giles, I must tell you this. David was discharged from the rest home, completely cured. It was nothing more than a nervous breakdown. Now, Dent, you have no right to frighten her like this.
I'm not frightened. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Dent for telling me what he did. I just want to know one thing. My husband was acquitted. Why should they still believe he's guilty?
Because since he left town 6 months ago, there ain't been none of these murders. Not a single one. Now that he's back, they'll start again.
That's what you believe, Mr. Dent?
Oh, no, ma'am, but that's what the folks are saying.
Thank you. And now, if you don't mind, I'd like to be alone.
Mrs. Giles, if there's anything I can do...
No, thank you. There's nothing. Good night, Mr. Croydon.
Good night. Come along, then.
Good night, ma'am.
Good night. Hello? Operator, will you give me the number of the railroad station, please? No. Never mind, operator. Don't bother.
Are you going to leave, Carolyn?
David, you heard.
Yes. And I heard everything else my very old friend, Mr. Dent, told you. I was behind the other door.
Then why didn't you come in?
Why ruin their fun? Besides, I was curious to see just what your reaction would be.
David, why did they have to tell me? Why couldn't you?
You think this was an easy thing to tell to a newly married bride?
I would have found out sooner or later.
I did plan to tell you, Carolyn, in due time. That's why I ordered Mary not to say anything.
Darling, it isn't true. This is all an insane dream, a nightmare.
No, Carolyn, it's not a dream, but in many ways it is a nightmare. Were you going to run away from me, Carolyn? Is that why you phoned the station?
Yes.
Carolyn, if you want to leave me, I can't blame you. I realize it may be asking a little too much of any woman. To be my wife and to live here.
Why did you come back here, Dave?
Because I want to prove to them that I'm not what they think I am. And I was hoping you'd help me. I thought maybe you loved me enough for that. Carolyn, I'm terribly sorry it must end this way.
I'm not going to leave, David.
Carolyn, I hope you understand what you're saying. You may be risking your life by remaining here.
I love you, David. I'll risk it.
I want you to be certain. Because in the end, I may fail and be put to death.
To death?
Yes, there are going to be other murders.
Other murders?
Don't ask me how I know this, but I'm almost positive that sometime tonight, a girl in or near this community will be killed. Brutally stabbed to death. I'll have to go out tonight and see if I can prevent it. Do you still want to remain?
Why are you telling me this?
Because I want to know if you really love me or if you said what you did to placate a madman, to quiet a homicidal maniac who may still murder you. Are you going to stay, Carolyn?
Yes. I'm going to stay, David. Mrs. Giles! Mrs. Giles, are you coming here? I'm coming, Mary. Mrs. Giles. There, Mary. Now just try to calm down. I saw them out there. Mary, try to pull yourself together. Tell me what you saw. There was a man out there. A man moving around. Are you sure of it, Mary? I don't see anyone. Well, maybe you can't see him from here, but I saw him from the window of my room. All right. Let's look out the window of your room. I don't want you to think I'm seeing things. I'm not the kind of girl who sees things. I didn't say you were, Mary, but Well, I don't notice anything unusual from your window either. You don't see anything? Just the lawn, the tree. Mary, I know we've all been under a strain today. I guess we're a little jumpy, aren't we? I guess so. But I wish Mr. Giles were here. I don't like us two being alone. I know, Mary, but it can't be helped. Now, come, dear, I think you'd better go back to bed. But I'm afraid to be alone in here. They can get in through the window. Then we'll close the shutters. Help me, Mary. All right, ma'am. There we are. The outside doors are all closed. Yes, I locked them myself, but... Well, still, this is a very old house. They can get in. Well, there's a lock on your door that works quite well. You can lock the door from the inside, and then you'll be as safe as you can possibly be. All right, I'll do that when you go. Very well, Mary. I'll go back to my room. I'm sure you'll sleep now. Good night. I hope so. Good night, Mrs. Giles. Did you lock the door, Mary? Yes, I just did. I'm turning out the light now. I'm sorry I troubled you, Mrs. Giles. Good night. Good night. Oh, she's right. I must be hearing things. Mrs. Giles! There's someone in here! Let go of my hand! Mrs. Giles! Mary? He was locked in here with me. Help me, Mrs. Giles! Mary! Oh, he's got a knife. I can feel it, a knife. Oh, no, let go of me, please. No. Mary!
You worked too hard, you ate too much, the cheesecake made you greedy. Let your aching head and stomach hear this message from old Speedy. Alka-Seltzer, plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is. Ah, those Speedy Alka-Seltzer bubbles burst into action to relieve your upset stomach and aching head fast. Use only as directed. Oh, what a relief it is. What a relief.
Well, friends, this is your host again. You ready to go on with our story of married bliss? I mean bliss. You know, if Caroline had only listened to this program, she'd have realized that it's always a mistake to marry a man who has a weakness for murdering the domestic help. It not only makes house cleaning difficult, but creates a terrible servant problem. But there is one compensation in marrying a homicidal maniac. When you'd call your mate crazy, you'd be so right. Well, let's get on with our story. As you remember, Caroline couldn't break into Mary's room, and now she rushes to the telephone and dials the operator.
Hello? Get me the police. Hurry, please. Hello? This is Mrs. Carolyn Giles. Would you please send someone right away? I think there's been a murder.
Hang up, Carolyn. Hang up that phone. What's the matter with you? Why didn't you do as I told you? I don't want the police to know about this until we're ready.
That room. You just came out of Mary's room.
Yes, I saw her.
Saw her? You were in there all the time.
You were locked in the room with her. You killed her.
Carolyn.
You murdered her. They're right about you. You murdered her.
Carolyn, you're hysterical. Stop it now. Stop. I'm sorry I had to do that. Now, you must get a grip on yourself.
Yes, David, I'll be all right. I'm all right now. How did you get into her room?
I heard screams when I parked the car. The window to her room was open, and I climbed through. I saw her on the bed, and then I unlocked the door and came in here.
You found the window open? But I locked it myself. I bolted the shutters.
Well, it's open now. When did you bolt the window?
A little while ago. The murderer must have been in the room hiding, and she locked herself in.
I guess he escaped through the window.
Yes. Perhaps that's what happened.
You still think I killed her?
I don't know what to think anymore. The way you came from her room.
I explained that.
Yes, I suppose you did.
Carolyn, now listen to me. If I killed her, do you think I'd be talking to you now? Here, look.
Son.
If I'd murdered Mary, the next step would be to kill you. And you see how easy it is for me to do it. Now, Carolyn, you believed in me before. I'm asking you to believe in me again. I don't want the police to know I left this house tonight. Dent's like the rest of them. He hates me. He'd be glad to accuse me of this crime. Now, Carolyn, I want you to say I was home all night with you.
And if I don't?
I've got this gun, Carolyn. If you let me down, nothing much will matter then. Now, that might be the police, Carolyn. I'm going to open the door.
Good evening, Mr. Giles.
Good evening, Dent. You got here quickly.
Maybe that's because I was kind of expecting to come.
Oh, have you been watching my house?
I'm saying. When I got that radio call, I didn't lose any time. Oh, Mrs. Giles, you phoned in something about a murder?
Yes, our girl, Mary, she's in there.
Mr. Giles?
Are you accusing me of this too, Dent?
Well, it's mighty funny, right here in your own home.
This time, I can easily prove that I had nothing to do with it. My wife and I were together all night.
Is this right, Mrs. Giles?
That's right, Mr. Dent.
Hello, David.
Richard, come in.
I understand that Dent questioned you again this morning.
Yes, but he didn't get anywhere. I think even he's beginning to get the idea that I'm not a murderer.
I see.
Oh, Carolyn, dear.
Oh, hello there. David, why didn't you warn me your friend was coming tonight?
Well, I phoned Richard only a few minutes ago. You see, Carolyn, I have to go out.
Go out?
Yeah. I didn't want to leave you alone after everything that's happened.
I know, but... Well, couldn't we come with you, David?
No, I'm afraid not.
Why not?
Well, it might be dangerous.
David, where are you going?
I'm sorry, dear, but I can't tell you. It won't be a long trip. It's only about 20 miles or so. That's all the information I can give you.
Has this something to do with these murders?
Perhaps.
Now, David, I wouldn't advise you to take matters into your own hands.
I'm afraid I have to, Richard. You see, the police haven't gotten very far, and my life is at stake.
Your life?
Isn't it obvious? The people are stirred up about these crimes. Who can tell when one of them may take it into his head to murder me? It's becoming a matter of the killer's life or my own. Furthermore, there's another reason why I must solve this. A reason I can't divulge right now.
Why not?
Darling, please don't ask me. I think that after tonight, all this will be over. Bye, Richard. Goodbye, Carolyn.
Bye. Richard?
Yes?
What did he mean by another reason?
Well, Carolyn, if he's right about the murderer, then the next logical victim will be a girl, an attractive girl who's very close to him, so that people will suspect him even more. And the most likely person is yourself.
$10 o'clock. Did he tell you how long we'd stay away, Richard?
No, he didn't. Shall I deal another round? Oh, that must be David.
Hello? David. Are you all right, darling?
Well, when will you be home? All right, I'll tell Richard. Goodbye. David's on his way home. He'll be here in an hour.
Where did he call from?
Town called Waverly. He says he knows who the killer is.
That's impossible.
How do you know?
Because if he knew, he'd never have made that call.
I don't understand.
It was a perfect signal to the murderer.
Murderer?
It told him that he was safe. That he had all the time he needs. A full hour.
Richard. You...
Please. I must warn you not to do anything foolish. It will only make matters worse for yourself.
What do you have in your hand?
A knife. You see, I simply press this button, and it snaps open. Try to control yourself, Carolyn. Don't try to fight the inevitable. Take my advice and submit to what will come. It will be less painful.
Told me.
You see how futile it is to struggle. I have the knife at your throat now. I have only to move my arm, and it's all over.
Why don't you? Why are you waiting?
There's no rush. For once, I have a little time.
Time?
Time seems to extend the experience. I must warn you not to scream. The moment you do, it will all come to an end, suddenly, violently. Screams are dangerous. One can never tell who hears them.
Take the knife away.
No.
Please.
Fear seems to do something to your features, Carolyn. You look extraordinarily beautiful. And I must compliment you on your self-control. You still haven't even raised your voice.
You can't get away with this, Richard. David will come home and find you.
That's not quite how it will happen. David will come home and find you. I shall have the rare pleasure of seeing his reaction. And then it will be his turn.
You're going to kill him?
Yes, it will be a new experience. I've never murdered a man before.
It can't possibly work. You'll be caught.
I plan to be. But I shall plead self-defense. Everyone will believe me because I'll tell them he murdered you. It's very difficult not to scream, isn't it, Carolyn?
They won't believe you. They'll never believe you.
Oh, yes, they will. My police commissioner hates David because he was freed after Dent arrested him. And his position also depends upon me. Oh, I admire you, Carolyn. None of the others held out this long. You must almost be insane with fear and terror, aren't you? And yet...
I won't scream, Richard. I won't.
In the end, you will.
I won't.
You must.
I won't.
You really are extraordinary, Carolyn.
I won't.
Carolyn.
Don't understand. You were here.
Almost all evening. I phoned from a neighbor's house to make him force his hand. I got back just in time.
Still alive.
Yes. Richard.
David, did you know? You couldn't have been that clever.
I suspected you, Richard, but I wasn't certain until tonight.
It was a trap? And Carolyn the bait? All a trick?
I'm afraid that's what it was, Richard. Why did you make them think it was me?
Why? Because you were a Giles. Always a little too clever. Never quite one of us. But you'll die for this, David. You'll be blamed for this and the other murders. I've left letters accusing you of the crimes. And Dent will believe them. Even over your wife's testimony. You'll die for this. They'll kill you. He's dead.
David, is it true what he said about the letters?
Probably. Dent will never believe me.
Good evening, Mr. Giles.
Dent.
Yeah. Been out there all night. When I heard the shots, I came running in. So you killed him.
Yes, but I had to, Dent. He was going to murder my wife.
That's true. He's the homicidal maniac you've been looking for. You've got to believe that, Mr. Dent.
Of course I believe it, ma'am. Been suspecting him for a long time. Ever since he spread them stories to folks about Mr. Giles. And I heard what he said before he died. You've got nothing to fear now, Mrs. Giles. You and your husband can live here, and we'll be proud to have you. And some folks will be mighty ashamed about what they've been saying and doing. I reckon I'd better call in, get them to take this man away.
I bet you thought David was crazy, but he fooled you, didn't he? As the squirrel said to the walnut tree, you're still not as nutty as people. Now that brings us to the moral of this story, which is taken from a retired witch who once said,
"Why slice your husband's head off when it's so easy to nag him to death?"
Oh, here's a little thought to take to bed. Never murder your enemies, because then you'll have no one to hate but yourself.
Inner Sanctum has been brought to you through the facilities of the United States Armed Forces Radio Service, the voice of information and education.
Well, I think you're going to have to agree that Richard had more than a few screws loose. While this story may seem familiar, overused, and perhaps even a bit cliché, I assure you that it was, in 1950, quite unique. You see, the term and concept of a serial killer is commonly attributed to former FBI special agent Robert Ressler, who used the term in 1974 in a lecture at the Police Academy in the United Kingdom. However, some argue that the term was actually used by Dorothy B. Hughes in her 1947 book, A Lonely Place. Either way, Richard from our story truly was a serial killer and was brought to justice by some good old-fashioned detective work. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that story. I found it utterly fascinating. Yes, it is Our Amazing Stories. But just what does that mean? We have segments for your stories, one for strange moments in history, and even one that plays clips from the golden age of radio to take us back in time. So what makes this segment different? Our Amazing Stories looks at people who did amazing things. So sit back and listen to this incredible tale. In 1862, Sarah Lockwood Pardee married William Winchester. Name sound familiar? He was, at the time, head of the famed gunmakers. Tragedy befell Sarah. Their infant daughter died of a childhood illness, and a few years later her husband was taken from her by tuberculosis. She became the heir to the Winchester Rifle Company and the Winchester Mystery House. Shortly after her husband's death, Sarah left their home in New Haven, Connecticut, and moved out west to San Jose, California. There, she bought an 8-room farmhouse and began what only can be described as the world's longest home renovation, stopping only when Sarah passed on September 5th, 1922. The newly widowed woman was convinced that the spirits of those her husband's weapons killed were coming to claim her family. So she set about building a structure to confuse the potential ghosts. She built a mansion outfitted with doors that opened into walls, stairs that went nowhere, and numerous confusing construction designs. In the middle of the house was a seance room where Mrs. Winchester would seek the psychic guidance for the next day's building. The original 8-room farmhouse grew into the world's most unusual and sprawling mansion, featuring the following: 24,000 square feet, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. In the end, the total build price was over $5 million in 1923. In today's money, that's $82.2 million. Heck of a buy. But what has remained is indeed a mystery. Even before her passings, rumors of a mystery house being built by an eccentric and wealthy woman swirled. Was she instructed to build this home by a psychic? Was she haunted by the ghosts of those felled by the gun that won the West? Did construction truly ever stop? What motivated a well-educated socialite to cut herself off from the rest of the world and focus almost solely on building the world's most beautiful yet bizarre mansion? Sarah Winchester was a woman of independence, drive, and courage who lives on in legend. And the mansion she built is world-renowned as much for the many design curiosities and innovations, many ahead of their time, as the reported paranormal activity that resides within its walls. These mysteries and more are what have drawn over 12 million guests to visit the Winchester Mystery House since its doors opened on June 30th, 1923. Now, my response to all of this is this: I have just added the Winchester Mystery House to my personal bucket list. Well, that's it for this edition of Our Amazing Stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas for stories for this segment or want to write one of your own, please let me know. I would love to work with you on the project and want to hear any ideas you might have. Just use the contact page on the main website and we'll get it done. Thank you for listening to Our Amazing Stories. Was episode number 533, and we're just rolling along. This time I need to thank Judy Stevens for her story and Mike Finch for suggesting the story, The Scream. Thank you guys. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.